Hello. Today we're going to be talking about communication in the rhetorical triangle. I think you all know a definition for communication. When a speaker or a writer has something to say, they have a message and they want to get it out to an audience. Sometimes communication is two-way. We have a speaker and a listener. Then the listener turns into the speaker rather quickly and it keeps bouncing back and forth, the message between the two people. We call that a conversation. Sometimes we have what seems like one-way conversations. A writer publishes a novel with a message that the reader then reads. But this is also a form of communication. Much communication now has the added element of technology being used to communicate the message to multiple people. This is the definition of media, and we'll be talking about that a lot this semester. Whatever kind of message we are trying to send, there are really three parts of the communication message. There is the writer or the speaker. There is the audience that is receiving the message. There is the subject or what the message is about. Sometimes it's helpful to think about this communication process as a triangle or the rhetorical triangle. Rhetorical is just a fancy word for thinking about effective communication. If you think about it, no matter what form of communication you choose, you're almost always trying to persuade someone to agree with you, or at least to understand you. Our communication triangle includes three kinds of appeals that will help you to communicate well. The three appeals are the writer's or the speaker's credibility. In other words, do you trust the speaker to tell you the truth or to tell you something that is indeed accurate? Second, we have the audience who will have an emotional reaction to what the speaker or the writer is trying to say. Sometimes that reaction may simply be boredom. Sometimes it might be confusion. Sometimes it might be sadness or happiness. Hopefully, it is the emotional reaction the speaker is intending. Did you ever have someone laugh at something that you didn't intend to be funny? Finally, the actual subject of the message is most effectively given in a logical fashion. In other words, the speaker is going to give us facts about the subject, things that we could look up, like statistics and quotations. Now let's take a look at this rhetorical triangle in action. In our first scenario, we have a speaker, Mrs. Carlino. We have an audience, and this is Mrs. Carlino's class. Our topic is rocket science. Now, if I'm the speaker here, we have one big problem. I don't know absolutely nothing about rocket scientists. So the problem is that I seriously lack credibility. I don't know what I am talking about. And really, you shouldn't be listening to me on anything having to do with rocket science. So what happens if we change the subject? I had no credibility about rocket scientists, but in this situation, I'm talking about my favorite books. This is something that I can talk about intelligently. I read a lot, and this is something that my audience may be interested in if I pick the right books. So if I start talking about my adult favorite books, they may not be interested, but if I talk about young adult novels, they may be interested depending on the type of books they like to read. So what happens if instead of changing the subject in the situation, we change the speaker? So instead of having Mrs. Carlino talk about rocket scientist with her credibility problem, we brought in an actual rocket scientist and he or she is going to talk about rocket science. Well, then we may have another problem. We have an audience that we need to think about. So if I have my rocket scientist talking to my class of 7th and 8th graders about rocket science, I hope that this person is going to be is not going to be filling my whiteboards with physics problems and talking about chemical reactions that happen with rocket fuels. What I'm hoping that my scientist is going to do is engage my 7th and 8th grade students and talk about something that they will understand, because communication won't happen if the audience is completely checked out because of boredom or confusion. In this scenario, if we are talking about physics, Mrs. Carlino might very well be the one who is checked out because of boredom and confusion as well. So this slide simply reviews what we've been talking about. We have a speaker or a writer who does or does not have credibility, and that credibility is based on the person's character, their expertise, and their reputation. We have an audience who's going to have an emotional reaction based on their values and beliefs. Do they think this topic is important? And we have the subject of the message that has emotional appeals like facts and reasoning. Finally, we have to ask ourselves what additional challenges might exist as we introduce technology into this triangle. What becomes harder? And conversely, what are the advantages of media? What does technology help communicate? We will spend much of the semester discussing this question. When you look at this as just a slideshow instead of as a movie, you'll see that there are several other slides in this presentation which might help you as you prepare your communication scenario. Please feel free to use them. Good luck with your assignment.